Being a male model in Muse it's a very interesting job. It's a very interesting role that you play, especially when it comes to people. I've met a lot of interesting people. I've met a lot of people that I regret meeting sometimes. But all in all, it's an interesting job if you think about it, because people want to pay me to represent them, or they want to pay me to become a part of their brand. So it's a interesting job in a sense, because being a male model in Muse, you experience a lot of people that only want you for your image, and as a real person they completely disregard it. I've worked with a lot of people. I've met a lot of people all the way from artists, models, PRs, photographers, engineers, directors, millionaires, billionaires. You meet all sorts of people doing this job, but it's not always glammy. It's not always glam and gold. I've met a lot of people that I've worked with that I'll never speak to or work with again, and I can get into it a little bit more as well. I've met directors that completely disregarded me as a man and as a person, just because of my image, just because of how I look, or because my face, or because how I dress. And it's really interesting. I was writing a show with this one director, and she was older than me. She was an entrepreneur. Of course, I'm not going to say any names, but she was doing very good for herself. Definitely doing more than me, especially at that time. And I was actually screenwriting with her. I was writing a show with her slash for her. And it didn't take too long before she eventually tried to, press herself up against me and take things out of proportion. So I've met a couple of directors like that. I've met a couple of directors that have either tried to do something with me that I didn't want to do, or, we can go back to her for an example. I'll tell you a story about that director as well. It's actually a crazy story, but maybe I'll save it for another time-ish. Maybe too late now, but I think I was over there one time. This was freshman year. And long story short, after going over there a few times, went over there one day. She was trying to get me to get in the bed with her. And she was all over me. And even on the, I got up and I went to the couch. Save the details for another time, but I got up and went to the couch to try to get away from her. And, I'm working, and which I told her before, if I come over there, I'm just going to be working and be on my computer. And I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but just over there, and she was all up on me, pressing all up against me. And eventually I tried to get up and go, and, she closed the door as I'm opening it. She's like, you got to finish what you started, and this and that. But I'm going to leave it at that. I've met a couple of directors also that strictly loved my look. They loved my branding. They loved my aesthetic. They loved what I brought to the brand, to the table, to the industry. But they never paid me. And this dude actually was running my face for the cover of his brand and his ads up to a year or two after we took those pics. And I wasn't even associated with them. I never even walked in the show. I showed up to the casting, got casted, and from there it just went downhill. And we're not going to get too into that, but that was in Houston. Models and photographers are definitely a weird breed as well. I've met a lot of models. I've met a lot of photographers, but ultimately, a present day 2024, I don't have as many model and photographer friends as I used to, because stuff can get weird. I don't have, issues working with fellow models or fellow photographers, but the problem is so many of them are disassociated from reality. And me being somebody who looks good, feels good, smells good, and then, meeting them outside of that in the real world and talking to them in the real world, you kind of see a difference. You see a disassociation, I guess you could say. These models and these photographers, they honestly just live through the camera, but in real life, they're not role models. They're nothing close to role models. Photographers is another thing. I've met so many photographers that wanted to use me for their branding. They want to use me for their image, and pretty much ended up trying to manipulate my branding. So, and models as well. Models as well. I don't know what it is, but I've met so many photographers, and probably about 80 to 90% of those photographers we don't even associate anymore. And it's just a part of it. The longer you're in this industry, you really start to realize, arts and entertainment and all of that, it's really just people living through some sort of void, and they only have one way to present it. I think that's something very common and very similar with artists as well. I met a lot of creative people. I met a lot of artistic people. I mean, a lot of artists, a lot of photographers, directors, engineers, again, just all these different types of fields, and even more than that than I listed. But the point of it is, I've been doing this for years. I've met hundreds of people, and if you're a real person, these relationships are not going to last long. And I've seen that. I've seen the differences between myself and other creatives and artists in the industry purely off the fact that I don't live my art in a way of delusion. I don't go around and, act to be conscious on the internet or through an image. But then when it comes to the real world, I'm a shitty person. That's not how it works. So I've had to cut off a lot of creatives. I've had to cut off a lot of artists. I've had to cut off a lot of friends, a lot of family, just because of the fact that as I've been doing this for so long, and I've worked with over 100 brands, and I've been doing all this stuff on my own, I've taught myself a lot, and you experience a lot, especially when you don't have a team that's out in front of you doing all the work for you. When you have to do all the work yourself, you're exposed to a lot more. So I've met a lot of creative people, a lot of artistic people that wanted to use my branding for their image. They wanted to use my branding to boost their brand. They love my aesthetic. They love what I bring to the table. But when it comes to being a real person and speaking on truth and being conscious and actually being a free person and a free thinker, they do not seem to like that. So yeah, a lot of creatives, a lot of artists that I know I'm not cool with anymore, because I am actually in the industry and I can see the difference between those that are true and those that are facades, and those that actually work hard to want to achieve the ultimate success versus those that just do it for an image and they just do it for a hobby. So I've had to correct a few people on that as well. It's an interesting job, to say the least.